my April podcast. A little late. Sorry. We've been moving. So I'm finally in my cabin in northern Minnesota. It feels pretty good. The wood stove is running. A little cold outside, maybe in the 40s. And today the Pope died. Well, last night, I guess. It's the day after Easter. I don't believe you could have choreographed the Pope's death much better. He died on Easter. Yesterday, he was out, even though his health was bad. Doctor said he shouldn't, but he got out, shook hands with some people, and gave his blessing. So, and then passed away. Kind of like that. Not that he passed away, but that he did it on Easter. I don't think he'll be rising from the dead anytime soon, but I think he was a good pope. Liberal pope. I imagine now the cardinals will choose a more conservative pope. But I'm not Catholic, or maybe I am. I might be the only Catholic ordained Protestant minister that you know, but I never got a letter from the Vatican or anything just excommunicating me when I became a Protestant minister. But when Father Moss was alive, he just passed away a couple months ago. He would hear my confession and have communion with me. Even delivered a Bible study in his church, in his parish one day, many years ago. Even though I was a Protestant minister, at the end of the Bible study, he said, that was good, Bruce, but you probably ought to get a better Bible than that King James version. I'm sure he was probably right. Well, today I want to talk about where I am, just shortly. Show you my cabin a little bit, and then I want to tell you the story of Sam Donnelly. Maybe I'll only tell you half the story, and tell the other half in the next podcast. I'm not sure. Sam Donnelly was a two-fisted preacher. He was sent by the Salvation Army to Tombstone, Arizona in the late 1800s. And they needed a two-fisted preacher because it was a rough mining town, among other things. And so Sam Donnelly and the Donnellites, even though they hate being called Donnellites, but he supposedly had a cult up on the Huachuca Mountains. So, without further ado, welcome to my retreat in northern Minnesota. There we go. Here comes a train. Pretty normal. Coming from the north, going south. Sounds like. also, coming up on the deck, pine tree, more pine trees, more pine trees, white pine, about as tall as you can get, and anyway, that's the front porch. Fire pit down there. Somebody's being kind of silly. And that's where I am. And here we go inside the cabin. Wood stove is going, keeping it nice and warm. Outside the window, TV. There's a bedroom over there, and a pantry. Anyway. Bathroom, and there's my bedroom, or my bed, and Pinky's bed, Pinky's TV, and my office where I'm podcasting or vlogging you from. So that's it. There's Lola. Thank you. Well, hello. You know, a few years back, well, probably 1975, 1976, somewhere in there, I pulled a book down off of my father-in-law's bookshelf. And it said Ghost Towns of Arizona. And I was just sitting there for the day, you know, hanging out in his office reading. And I read about all the different ghost towns in Arizona. I'd never been to Arizona yet, so it must have been about 1975 because I did drive through Arizona in 76. So maybe 74 even. And there was a small blurb there about Sunnyside, a ghost town in the Huachuca Mountains in southeast Arizona. And it had a brief description of the Donnellites. They were a religious community up at the top of the Huachuca Mountains near Miller Peak that mined the gold of the earth in their copper glance mine and the gold of God's word in the Bible. I wasn't much intrigued or anything, but then years later, well, 20 some years later, 30, 1996 or 7, probably 1997. I was with my class in a PhD program at Arizona State University, going through the Arizona, the official archives of the Arizona Capitol building. And one of my colleagues, I can't remember her name or other than the fact that she was blonde, came to me, should remember her. For some reason, the only girl I can or woman I can remember in the program was Mara, and I don't think it was Mara. It was one other woman. But she brought me a file with a court case with the record of a court proceedings from the 1890s, late 1890s, of this guy named Sam Donnelly, who was up in the top of the Huachuca Mountains here. I don't know what Sam looked like, but I used AI and typed in 1890s preacher in the Huachuca Mountains. I think I used kind of impressionist oil painting kind of thing, and this is what I came up with, or one of the pictures I came up with. So I don't know, maybe Sam looked like that. But these mountain peaks in the desert and range basin, and that's the geographical term for this area of Arizona, from the essentially from the White Mountains and the Mogollon Rim down to into Mexico. It's in the Sonoran Desert, and they're called Sky Islands because they reach up to the sky from the desert floor. And Miller Peak here, wilderness area in the Coronado National Forest, is 9,466 feet above sea level. And these Sky Islands, reach up into the sky from the desert basin, and you go through numerous biotas as you climb. I mean, you're starting out in the Sonoran Desert, and the Sonoran Desert isn't some kind of like sandy desert. It's kind of a lush desert, but it's when I say lush, it's filled with cactuses, and that's where you get those what do you call the Saguaro cactus, the ones with the branches, that you see in the cartoons and in the John Wayne movies, that John Ford so liked. And this particular mountain range is right on the border of Mexico and Arizona. It's the earliest record that we have of this particular area is from Captain Juan Mateo Manhe's companion, Father Esteban Carino. And he wrote in 1694, the Huachucas, the Thunder Mountains, the Indians called them, have retained their Aboriginal name and have always been just a little off the path. And this is where we think, Coronado may have come across here. There right at the border, as you come up the mountains and you're up at the top. It's Coronado Pass, Coronado National Forest. Other accounts have them coming up through the San Rafael Valley, which is probably more likely. And to the west of the Huachuca Mountains is the San Rafael Valley. And it's still high enough that, it's not really desert. It's more of a grassland kind of thing, kind of plain.
You have to get all over to Tucson to get to Swaharo. But it's the headwaters in the San Rafael Valley of the Santa Cruz River, and uh, and the Santa Cruz River comes out of the San Rafael Valley, goes down into Mexico, and then curves over and comes up uh, by Tucson and goes through the city of Tucson, and then Interstate 19 follows it, kind of north. The Spanish had mines up here in the Huachuca Mountains. They weren't particularly successful. Uh, most of them were abandoned uh, because they quickly exhausted the minerals that were there, and and the uh, and the Apaches, drove them out. But after Geronimo's surrender in 1866, um, settlers started to move in, and so the Huachuca Mountains, resisted both missionaries and miners for a very long time. Uh, uh, in 1874, Geronimo had surrendered, uh, but George Price and Peter Sherman, a couple of pioneers, were killed by the Apaches in Parker Canyon, which is just down uh, in the San Rafael Valley below the mountains. But eventually, Sam, can we go back to Sam? He's kind of cute little guy. Of course, that's not what he looked like. Sam Donnelly came to Tucson. He was a two-fisted preacher. He came from Scotland. His father was from, and he was born in Barhead, Scotland, in 1852. His father was Irish and a stern and very sharp Presbyterian preacher. He migrated to Scotland from Ireland, and there was a spirit of classic Protestantism at the time, and he fought with the devil and the Pope, and the Catholic priests in Scotland feared him. Sam was 12 when his father lay on his deathbed, and the priest called to Catholic women. They were calling on a Catholic woman who was on her deathbed at the same time, but the priest got turned around, and they showed up at Sam's father's place, and he rose from his bed when he saw the priests, and he said, "Thou son of darkness, Sam, give me a knife." Sam, they had bolted the door when they came in, and they saw these priests saw that Sam's dad was coming after him, and so Sam grabbed a knife and he used it to unbolt the door and let the priests out, and they fled. But that's the kind of background Sam came from. When he got to well, he joined the Merchant Marine, and then he developed a reputation as a fighter. and a scrapper in the Merchant Marines. He wasn't particularly religious. He drank hard and fought hard, like a good sailor. He called himself a scientific boxer. And anyway, on his travels on the ship, he ended up in San Francisco, down on the waterfront there, and he was visiting the bars and getting into brawls and stuff like that when he wandered into a Salvation Army meeting, and they were singing hymns and stuff like that, and it touched Sam kind of in his heart. I don't know. He just before wandering in there, he apparently got into a fight with one of his shipmates and some local San Franciscan or other sailors that were in there in San Francisco, and I don't know, the story's not particularly clear, but Sam left the fight because he thought that his buddies wanted him to kill the sailors, and Sam wasn't really into murder. He just liked to fight. He's a scientific boxer, you know. So he wanders into the Salvation Army meeting, and they're singing hymns, and his mother, you know, used to sing hymns. His father, you know, was a Protestant preacher, and his mother would sing hymns to him, and he kind of felt nostalgic in there, and anyway, he got saved. He got born again, and he became a preacher himself for the Salvation Army. And so, in his career as a preacher, he was no less stormy than he had been in his earlier life. I mean, he caused problems in the different denominations. He traveled to Los Angeles, the city of angels, where it's definitely a strong religious and still is today, and got involved with the Methodists and the Presbyterians, and he had a disagreement with everybody all the time. I mean, he was still just a fighter, and a disagreement with his denomination people. At this period of time in the late 1800s and early 1900s, there was a movement in Protestantism called the social gospel. And I don't know, I did a paper on it when I was in grad school. But they thought, you know, taking Jesus to the streets was what was important. And this is when different denominations started missions, you know, to help the drunks. I mean, we aren't to prohibition yet. It's still before prohibition by a couple decades. And I don't know, in Chicago, Hull House, Jane Hull, you know, started a mission to redeem drunken, you know, people and homeless and that kind of thing. And as a matter of fact, John Dewey, I don't know, some of you don't know who John Dewey is. He's kind of the father of modern education techniques. He's in the 1920s, he wrote extensively about education and that we ought to quit teaching students what we think is the truth and start teaching them how to solve problems. As an aside, if you side story from Sam Donnelly, Dewey, 1920s. This is the decade of the Scopes trial. Where John Scopes was accused or charged with teaching evolution in a public school, and I think it's in Kentucky or maybe Tennessee, down there somewhere. And Clarence Darrow and William Jennings Bryan were the lawyers for this case. Clarence Darrow for the defense, represented John Scopes, and the William Jennings Bryan III was the prosecuting attorney. And William Jennings Bryan won the case in the court. Scopes had to pay the $250 fine. But in the press, in the media of the day, the trial turned into a debate between Clarence Darrow and William Jennings Bryan on which was the truth. Was the Bible the truth, or was science the truth? And Clarence Darrow won the battle in the media, if you will. William Jennings Bryan, even though he won the case, he felt defeated. A little while after that, he killed himself. I guess he didn't like losing. He'd run for president 3 times and lost. And this is the decade that Albert Einstein publishes his general theory of relativity. Well, Dewey said, after this kind of stuff, he's looking around. He was a social gospeler, bring Jesus to the streets, kind of thing, save society, if you will. And he said, let's quit teaching students what we think is the truth, because the truth doesn't exist. It keeps changing. The more we learn, the more the truth changes. And so, he called it progressive education. It's progress. You add progress to anything and it becomes good, and it's a God term. How many want to regress? No. How many like to progress? It's a God term in America. The more liberal arm of the politics, call them progressives as opposed to conservatives, you see. But by 1945, every educator that came out of an American university was steeped in Dewey's progressive education techniques. He said we ought to teach students how to solve problems. And by 1945, they might not know who Dewey was, but they were doing Dewey when they went into their, first grade, second grade class. The McGuffey readers were kind of starting to fade away. They were kind of the hallmark of reading education from 1840, up through the 1930s and 40s. There are 12 little books. Started out with first grade, second grade, third grade. How many know that George Washington chop down a cherry tree, right? No, it never happened. It was McGuffey readers, and they were stories that taught little kids honesty, patriotism. Abraham Lincoln rode back 22 miles to give back the 2 pennies that he got overpaid, from the shopkeeper. Honest Abe. So in 1945, of course, we're coming out of the Civil War. I mean, out of the World War II. Every educator going in, and then of course we have the baby boomers after 1945. And when you think about it, when did these baby boomers get to college? Well, 1965, 1975, 79, so late 60s and 70s. And you look at college students of that time, and they're out to solve the world's problems. They got sex, love, and rock and roll, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. They're out to solve the world's problems. Anyway, that's how somebody's philosophy is working on you all the time. But anyway, we're back in the late 1800s, and Sam had a disagreement with social gospel. The idea that he saw that the Reformed mission doctrines of the day centered on the relationship between Christianity and social work, instead of Christianity and the spirit. It was growing strong in American Protestantism, a rejection of individual salvation for an ideology, and an ideology of a heroic social mission, especially among Presbyterian and Methodist denominations. The workers in the social missions savored the warm, emotional glow, that came from helping the disinherited. Work in a mission, and the institutional churches provided a sense of purpose, more appealing than the intangible and ethereal promise of salvation by God's election. Other otherworldly reward kind of gave way to, or shifted to, a more earthly and immediate kind of reward. They were beginning to reject the I don't know, Calvinistic kind of doctrine of individual salvation and more of the modern ideas of teamwork. As a matter of fact, if you take a course today in teamwork or conflict management or even small group, you're going to use John Dewey, his problem solving formula. He called it the pattern of reflective thinking. And, I mean, even today, in business and in corporate America, we're still, and in politics, we're still using Dewey's system of solving problems. And it's a good system, don't get me wrong. So when Sam was in the world, he was the worldliest of them all. But when he was in as a preacher and in Los Angeles, he fought with the idea that between works and grace, it's really Sam uh, uh, immersed himself in Paul's letters, and he was all into, that relationship with the Spirit is what was important, not works of righteousness. He looked at what was happening in the social gospel movement as human works, uh, justification by what you did, get, get out into the world. And anyway, the Salvation Army, needed a two-fisted preacher to go to Tombstone, Arizona. And so they chose, it was a holiness kind of mission. And they sent Sam to Tombstone, Arizona, because they needed a two-fisted preacher in that rough town, which is just north of the Huachuca Mountains. So Sam came to Tombstone to establish a holiness mission. And he spent hours every day in the scripture. And he became more and more at odds with the Episcopalians, the Baptists, the Methodists, fight against each other so much. And he bitterly, and he was so bitterly in the letter of the word that he said that they can't see Jesus and the blessed spirit of the word. He focused on Paul's letters. It was the law versus the spirit of the word. And it was the spirit of the word to guide you, not the law. Well, so he found him, even in Tombstone, he found himself at odds with the local. As a matter of fact, one of the women that got saved in one of his meetings, Mrs. Langford, who was a Methodist, refused for a long time to go back and hear him. I mean, he was a charismatic kind of guy, preacher, but she refused to go back and hear him for a long time because he was solely engaged in breaking up churches. But anyway, in his meetings that he had there, a guy named Ed Langford, he was a blacksmith, and Albert Gattrell, he was a saloon keeper. They got saved in his meetings. Gattrell saloon was over in Charleston, which was the headquarters of the Clanton gang. The OK Corral in Tombstone, White Earp and Clanton gang. And so Albert, he knew how to take care. He was an excellent shot. And running a saloon in a town that's run by the Clanton gang, he was one tough kind of guy. And so he not only owned a saloon, he owned a bank. But his bank got robbed so many times that he went bankrupt. So he got rid of the saloon. He got together with Ellis Sinclair, who was an assayer that had a deed for a gold mine up in the Mule Mountains, and so Mrs. Langford, Ed Langford, and Mrs. Langford, and the Gattrells and Ellis, the assayer, they all went up into the Mule Mountains to this mine to you know see if they could make a fortune by mining gold. Well, it didn't work out for them. They stayed in the Mule Mountains for 9 months and didn't find any gold. So they left to head up into the Huachuca Mountains, where they'd come by a claim for the Copper Glance mine. And it was up above Sunnyside Canyon in the mountains there. And there's a hiking trail going up Sunnyside Canyon. And it's trail number 117, and it's part of the Arizona Trail. The Arizona Trail goes from the Coronado monument at the foot or at the south end of the Huachuca Mountains. It goes through the Huachuca Mountains up past Miller Peak, and then here down to Sunnyside Canyon, and then over kind of to over toward Tucson and then up. And it goes all the way up through the Superstition Mountains here in central Arizona, east of the where Circle Stone is, and goes all the way up to Utah through the White Mountains and all of that through the res. And so Arizona Trail. Here's Miller Peak. And there you go, the Arizona Trail. And the Arizona Trail goes right past the Copper Glance mine, and then goes down out of the mountains through the Sunnyside Canyon to the town, the ghost town of Sunnyside, established in 1895. I don't know if I can remember which one's at Albert Gatrell's house. I think it might be this one by the tank, if I can remember right. I don't know. This is the ghost town that I read about. This one's not Gatrell's house. I don't know whose one this is. So Sam Donnelly. Well, the story doesn't end here. It's just getting going. Because Sam started his mission up in the Huachuca Mountains at the Copper Glance mine, where they mined the gold of the Word of God at night, and they mined the gold of the earth during the day. And at one point, there were almost 800 people up there mining gold in the Donnellites. And when we come back, I'll tell you the story of Sam's Bible camp of the gold of the earth and the gold of God's word.
Well, that's all of Sam Donnelly's story today. I'll continue the story in my next cast, which will come much faster than this one. That's taken a while to get up there. Sam heads up into the Huachuca Mountains with his small team. I need to correct something I said toward the end of the last part of the story. When I said 800, no, it's 80. He finally accumulated 80 people up in his little remote camp. And it wasn't long before he got into trouble with the religious people of the Southeast Arizona, with the press, and the courts. So I'll tell you that story when we meet again. I had to change my shirt because I was out hauling wood while I took a break. I don't know what it says. ASU, well, backwards SU on my camera. I'm wondering if it says USA on your camera, because I don't know how this works. But either is fine, because if it said ASU, well, that's where I went to grad school for the PhD program. And if it says USA, well, that's fine, because, my last podcast was about the 4 words of freedom that we have lost. Join me on my website for all the podcasts. Voice, VOICEWLD.com. Okay. Don't know how to put it up yet on here. But I'll figure it out next time. But check out my websites, and I'll see you next time. Adios.